You are invited to join our brand new Facebook group, Sex and Intimacy Support for Catholic Women. This is a Facebook group that is only about sex and intimacy questions, and it is a women's only Facebook group. I'm going to be in there from time to time answering questions, providing support, but this is just a place for you to get support, ask questions, and maybe even vent a little bit if you need it. I've heard from so many of you guys with questions and comments, and sometimes I just can't keep up with all of it. And so I want us to be able to join together and provide that support together in a Facebook group. So go check out the link in the show notes for the Sex and Intimacy Support for Catholic Women Facebook group. And I hope to see you in there. How do we handle the situation where the man is ready for intercourse and aroused far faster than the woman is during foreplay and during sex? Today, we are answering a listener question about tempering male arousal and being able to better attend to the wife. And I have my husband, Kurt, joining me to talk on this topic. So let's get started. Welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, the sex and intimacy podcast for Catholic women. My name is Ellen Holloway, and I am a Catholic speaker and coach who specializes in sex and marital intimacy. And I am on a mission to help you actually enjoy and desire good, holy sex with your spouse. All right. Welcome back, Kurt, to the podcast.
I'm here.
All right, so we are answering the question, how to temper male arousal curve to better attend to and better love the wife. I love this question. It's so good. This is going to be a great question to have a male voice on as well. So, and I think part of the reason why this question is great for Kurt and I to answer is because this is something that we have journeyed through to figure out. And so we have some practical tips and legitimate suggestions for you on this exact topic. All right. So just a little bit more, I think, background into what this person is probably asking. The likely situation that we're looking at is that the man's arousal curve is shorter than the woman's. This is super common. We see this all the time. And so the man is either ready for intercourse before the woman is ready for intercourse, or the man reaches climax during intercourse long before the woman is ready for climax. So either kind of like one or even both of those situations. So Kurt, let's start off with just hearing from you a little bit on, like, what does a man need to be thinking about here to start solving this problem?
Sure. I think that one of the big things that we come to with our Catholic faith is, at the end of the day, especially in this act, the man is responsible for the woman and the woman is responsible for the man. What do I mean? I mean that if the man orgasms, it is an injustice to the woman if she has not orgasmed, right? So it is the man's job in sex to ensure that the woman orgasms, right?
And this is like what St. Paul is talking about in Ephesians when he's like, your body is not your own. Your body belongs to your spouse. Like, your women, your body belongs to your husband. Husbands, your body belongs to your wife. It's like we are giving ourselves as a total self-gift in marriage. And that is seen in the marital act in really, like what Kurt just said. Like, ladies, our job is not our pleasure. Our job is our husband's pleasure. And gentlemen, your job is not your pleasure. Your job is your wife's pleasure.
Right. So if you take that and you extrapolate it a little bit, if you're doing something, say at the beginning at foreplay, and it's like, oh, this seems to be fun for her, I want it to be a little bit more fun to me. Like, that's not the point, right? Focus on your wife.
Yeah, because If we're looking at, generally speaking, the male arousal curve is shorter and a little bit more straightforward than
abrupt.
Yeah, and abrupt, I think that's a good one. Straightforward as in like it has less distractions that come toward it than the woman's that is longer and takes more dedicated focus. And so generally speaking, foreplay is really for the woman's body to get to an aroused state, because the man's body, what needs to happen prior to penetration for the man's body is that the penis needs to become erect. And that is actually a very quick thing to happen as soon as there is a low level of arousal for a man. That's just how the male body works. The female body the vaginal canal needs to elongate. So the cervix actually rises and the vaginal opening needs to widen. This is a process that takes more time. It's not as immediate of a process as the male erection. And so foreplay really is the goal of foreplay is to get the bodies ready for sex. And typically that means that the woman's body needs that foreplay time, and that foreplay is going to be focused on her body in order to get it to an aroused state that is where the vaginal canal is lengthened and the vaginal opening is open enough. Otherwise, it's going to be painful for her and it's not going to be pleasurable at all. And, you know, I've talked about that a ton on the podcast. We're not going to get into pain and stuff like that in this episode. So, gentlemen, like what Kurt was saying is foreplay really is probably not for you.
No, not in the way of like, you just don't need to do it. More of like, have fun because she's having fun.
Right. Like focus on your wife during foreplay. And wives, if you're listening to because this is a women's podcast, so we don't always have that many gentlemen listening, like explain this to your husband that the point of foreplay is actually getting your body to a physically aroused state to where sex can be comfortable and pleasurable.
And be okay with it as well. Of like, oh, he's getting bored. Like, this isn't fun for him. I can guarantee you it's fun.
You know, this was something that I really had to get over because I had that little voice in my head whenever like foreplay was taking a long time and like I wasn't really getting aroused. I was just like, oh, obviously like my husband is getting super bored right now. This isn't fun. The reason that my mind was saying that is like I wasn't really having fun, and because it like wasn't working and it was taking a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, to speak into it a little bit more too, the tempering the male arousal from the fact that they are super aroused by doing the foreplay, right? And not going on to the next step before everybody is ready, right? That is not necessarily an easy thing to do because the man may be getting extremely turned on, but it is his job at that point, as I said earlier, it is his job for the woman's orgasm and all of that stuff. So if he wants to do that, he, as has been said on this podcast many times, needs to die to himself and allow for the appropriate amount of stimulation to occur prior to getting to the next step.
And this is going to take practice, especially if you guys are like newly married. I know this was something that we dealt with, was just like a very quick male arousal curve and a very long female arousal curve.
She has to be ready by now. I'm so ready.
Yeah. And so, you know, gentlemen, this is going to take some work on your part to calm your body down. Take deep breaths. You know, remove as much stimulation as you can. So when we were talking about like foreplay focusing on the woman, like, you know, ask your wife to stop touching you, even if it's like not anywhere near your genitals, if it's too arousing for you, if you need to like take a step back. Very likely, I'm going to say that foreplay doesn't involve touching the male genitals. If this is your situation, if you're dealing with, a very quick male arousal curve, we are focusing on the woman's body and the woman's genitals here. And another one that can be helpful is, gentlemen, you can leave your clothes on, because that's going to like put a barrier between the stimulation of your body as well as your genitals. And clothes are not hard to take off. Like, you can pretty quickly take clothes off when things are starting to get closer to intercourse. Don't be afraid to take pauses. Like, I'm talking to the men here. If you're starting to get aroused a little too much and you know that your wife is not there, it's like, hey, can we just take a pause? Let me grab a drink of water and I'll come back. Like, and that's not stopping the sexual act. Like, it would be very different if you were like, let's pause and go watch a movie now. Like, that would be like stopping the sexual act. But if you're like, I need to pause and just like calm my body down so that I don't get aroused too quickly here, so that this can be a mutually pleasurable act. Yeah. So grab a glass of cold water, take deep breaths, and just like focus on trying to calm your body and just like bringing relaxation to your body. And that will dip you down in that arousal curve if it's starting to go up. And communication is absolutely key here. Ladies, you have to communicate the point at which you're actually ready for intercourse, especially if like this isn't something that has been communicated for you before. Because this is something that we dealt with, and like Kurt just sort of gave a little quippy side to it just a little bit ago. It's like, oh, she must be ready because I'm ready. That if this isn't something that you and your husband have communicated at all, that is likely what your husband is thinking out of pure, it makes sense. It is a statement that makes sense. It's a thought that makes sense. But if you are not ready, you need to communicate that, and then communicate when you are ready to move into intercourse.
And gentlemen, remember, when you are in the middle of this act, right? In foreplay, whatever it is, there isn't necessarily as much blood flow to your brain. So you might be making incorrect choices, right? Like, oh, I'm ready for this. Let's go. It'll be fine. Even though it hasn't been fine the last 5 times that we did it. I'm a big man and I'm going to do it this time. Yay. Don't trust that. You're not thinking right at that point in time.
don't trust your...
No, let your wife tell you when we're ready to go, or whatever it be.
Oh my gosh, it's like pregnancy brain. Except for men. Like, because like during pregnancy, especially toward the very end of pregnancy, like women are getting way less blood flow to their brain. And so like it's hard. Decision making is hard, and like remembering things is hard. But like what you just explained is like pregnancy brain for men. Arousal brain. Can we call it arousal brain?
I don't like it.
No,
I don't like it.
Oh my goodness. I think the big thing as we kind of close out here is this is something that's going to take some practice. Like, tempering the male arousal curve is a hard thing to do. It is a skill that is learned. And ladies, we can help the most here by being patient as your spouse learns to temper that arousal curve and wait until you are ready for intercourse, or working on trying to last longer during intercourse. We didn't speak into lasting longer during intercourse as much, but it's kind of the same thing of what I was talking about of just like calming the body down. So like deep breaths and just really focusing. What else, Kurt, on kind of
practice?
Yeah. It's just, and it's intentional practice, right? It's not, okay, let's just have lots of sex and just like just continuing to do the same thing that you've done over and over again. It's like you're intentionally having sex, men, and trying to slow that arousal curve down or last a little bit longer in intercourse. And celebrate the 5 additional seconds that you lasted. That's awesome. Celebrate the 30 seconds. Celebrate, like, if you're starting from the instant that penetration happens, the man is ejaculating, and you get to a point where he can last 10 to 20 seconds, that's huge. And you get to a point where he can last a few minutes, that's huge. Intercourse, the like penis in vagina part, on average is like 4 to 8 minutes. We're not looking for 30 here. Like, we're looking for a few minutes.
Yeah, I think also, if you hear some secular stuff and you just walk the random interviews like with women of just like, oh, how long should men last in bed, blah, blah, blah. That stat that they're talking about, generally speaking, they're including foreplay here.
Right. They are.
So when you're like, oh my God, 30 minutes. Oh,
that's 25 minutes of foreplay and 5 minutes of intercourse. Like, yeah, lasting longer during intercourse. Gosh, this is an episode in and of itself. But like, the female orgasm during intercourse is very difficult to achieve unless she is highly aroused prior to penetration happening, or if there is direct clitoral stimulation happening during intercourse. Like, your goal is not to try to get like 20 minutes of intercourse to eventually get the woman's body to orgasm during intercourse with penetration alone. Like that, yes, that's possible. And if that works for you guys, that's fine. But like, that's typically not how the male and female body work. And it is absolutely normal and well within the range for intercourse to only last a few short minutes. And the bulk of sex is really foreplay and maybe some afterplay. Yeah. So practice makes perfect here. So practice with that intentionality, and then just give yourselves grace. We've talked about this on podcast episodes when we talk about female orgasm or moral licitness, but just a quick reminder that the female orgasm can happen before, during, or directly after penetration. So if the female orgasm doesn't happen during that penetrative, like intercourse part of sex, it is okay. It can happen directly after. And my boy, St. John Paul II, when he wrote Love and Responsibility, he talked about the necessity of this, that this is a justice issue. Kurt mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast episode, that it is an injustice to your spouse if they don't reach orgasm and they want to. And so, gentlemen, like this, it's your job. Like, make it happen. Make it happen after, if it needs to happen.
It does need to happen.
And if you're having trouble making it happen, ladies, this is why I have the orgasm course for Catholic women. So I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. Check that out, because that's going to give you all the ins and outs on orgasm.
Shameless plug. Woo-hoo.
Every plug on my podcast is absolutely shameless because this is my podcast. I think just to close out this episode, the best reminder that we can give you, we've already, we've mentioned this once already, or several times on this episode, but sex is not for you. It is for your spouse. Like, this is a gift of you to your spouse, and it is a mutually pleasurable act. Your job has nothing to do with your own arousal and your own pleasure during the act.
Like, and I'm speaking to the men and women, like anyone here. Sex is not for you. It's for your spouse.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you listen to podcasts on a platform that gives you the option to rate or review, we'd love for you to do that because it helps us spread the word about the podcast. If you ever have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. Until next time.